On January 22, 1973, American women won the right to own and control their own bodies. This vision became reality when Sarah Weddington successfully argued a landmark Supreme Court case, Roe v. Wade. The efforts of this young Texas attorney gave American women the crucial right to choose safe, legal abortion. For most women, this offered unprecedented potential for self-determination and a real sign of progress in the ongoing struggle for freedom. However, since the inception of the right to choose abortion, it has been attacked relentlessly by those who reject this most basic human liberty. For the past 17 years, anti-abortion forces have labored to overturn this right by maintaining a continual barrage of protests, rallies, and clinic invasions. Throughout this struggle, these extremists have drawn their financial support primarily from religious organizations. They have also received important political support from the Republican Party since it added an anti-abortion plank to its platform.
In the early 80s, when the Republican Party adopted the pro-life platform, there were many Republicans who were dissatisfied. And the National Planned Parenthood started a group called Republicans for Choice. And it started off pretty slowly, but then groups around the country, such as ours in Houston, decided to start a Republican for Choice affiliate.
To further advance the anti-choice position, on July 3, 1989, the U.S. Supreme Court handed down a ruling that could restrict access to abortion at the state level. The case was Webster v. Reproductive Health Services. But well before the Webster ruling occurred, pro-choice Houstonians were becoming increasingly aware of its importance and began preparing for greater personal involvement. Feminist organizations that were previously dormant became active once again and led the way for other concerned Houstonians who wanted to join the cause. Houston's pro-choice movement began with a press conference in January 1989, publicizing a rally in Austin, Texas. Its purpose? To celebrate the anniversary of Roe v. Wade. The principal supporters were TARAL, which is Texas Abortion Rights Action League, Planned Parenthood, Houston Area Women's Center, with guest speakers Nikki Van Hightower and Sissy Farenthold. After the press conference, about 100 pro-choice Houstonians went to Austin to join the rally. At this point, Houstonian pro-choice supporters began uniting for a common cause, the Webster decision. After the Austin rally, this concern spread among pro-choice Houstonians who were still inactive. As a result, these people became volunteers in pro-choice organizations. They assisted by politicizing others, attending rallies, and participating in other forms of activism. The Houston pro-choice movement was just beginning when the opposition made a very serious move. On March 24, 1989, on Good Friday, the local chapter of Operation Rescue invaded Planned Parenthood.
One of the significant entries in the Planned Parenthood diary between the Webster arguments and the Webster decision was the fact that for the first time in 52 years of our history, we were invaded, literally on Good Friday in 1989. We weren't prepared. We had thought that we probably would never experience what other clinics had, but on that morning, about 8:30, I think it was about 11 men, 9 men, a couple of women, charged the building, rushed upstairs carrying a 200-pound block of seasoned cement, put it down in the waiting room, attached themselves to it, and just waited to see what kind of havoc that would cause in the clinic. The building was locked from the outside with a Krypton bicycle lock, and inside the building was a fake nurse practitioner who had scheduled a job interview that day. And she was on hand for a while before we realized that she was a plant, and we booted her out the side door. But very shortly then, our parking lot and our street looked like there'd been a SWAT event here. There was patrol cars everywhere. We literally had half of Houston's mounted police force here, huge long horse trailer. The city ambulance service was here, the paramedics, they brought the jaws of life, they brought in drills, they ran cables of air hoses upstairs to the clinic, trying all these different things to try to disattach these two guys who were chained to the cement block. They finally resorted to just chiseling away the cement, one little scrabbly piece at a time. And that took a little while. The helicopter flew over. They tried to block the entrance, the protesters did. The horsemen ran up, close to them, and I now know the value of mounted police. They really are very effective. And that pretty much blasted our day. We had a press conference because every press person in town was here wanting an interview. So we finally pulled everybody into the boardroom, and Peter made his classic statement that we will shut down when hell freezes over.
As a result of this so-called rescue, 10 of the protesters who invaded the clinic were arrested. The most serious charge incurred was criminal trespassing, which earned the perpetrators a $500 fine and 90 days in jail. In April, a number of Houstonians participated in the March for Women's Equality and Women's Lives, sponsored by NOW, the National Organization for Women.
We knew that Webster was coming up, and National had decided to sponsor a rally for March for Women's Lives in Washington, D.C., and that was in March or April, I believe. And so the chapter did sponsor, and some of us went up for that march.
One of the things that happened while we were waiting for Webster was the April March on Washington, which was absolutely the most wonderful thing that I'd ever been to. I don't expect to have that feeling again of, you know, collecting around the Washington Monument with 300, 500,000 people. We'll never know the exact number. People who all felt the same way that we did, and it was there was this huge swell of righteous anger, and it feels so good to feel that you're angry and you're right about something. We went there from our hotel on the subway, and we got on the subway, and it was empty. It was early in the day, and it was empty, and we thought, gee, there's not too many people here. But as the sublines converged on the Washington Monument, the train doors were open, and hundreds of people were suddenly on the platforms, you know, all heading for the escalators up and out to the monument, and it was a very exciting day.
After the Washington March, participating Houstonians returned highly motivated and ready to continue working for the cause. In anticipation of Webster, volunteerism continued to increase, but only gradually. It soon became clear that to enlist a significant number of pro-choice Houstonians, the movement required a more immediate threat. And soon one arrived. On July 3, 1989, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled on Webster. The Webster ruling did not overturn Roe v. Wade, but it did provide the means for states to minimize and eventually eliminate the right to choose abortion. Anti-abortion forces viewed this ruling as a victory, so they decided to increase their activism to maintain political pressure. Shortly after the decision, concerned Houstonians began flooding local women's organizations with calls to ask how they could help.
That Wednesday, July the 4th, after the Webster decision, the Now tape had 150 calls on it.
One of the wonderful things that happened post-Webster, like within that week, was all these hundreds of volunteers who wanted to do something, write somebody, you know, stuff envelopes. And within about 24 hours, we oriented 100 new volunteers, 2 separate sessions on 2 separate days. And I remember one day, I guess it was the first day, that we had a noon session, and the boardroom was packed with people who were ready to act. And Yolanda, who was orienting them, came running out of the boardroom, and her eyes were big as saucers. I said, "What's wrong?" She says, "Sissy Farenthold is sitting in the middle of the boardroom. She's here to go through orientation." And it was just wonderful to have someone from the first generation of this battle showing up again.
The anti-choice movement was getting a lot of coverage on TV, and it occurred to me late 1988 that there was something that I could do. And so I called Planned Parenthood and spoke with Yolanda and decided that it was time for me to get involved. And I called my friend Catherine to invite her to go to a meeting with me.
When Dory called, I was really excited at the opportunity to take an active part in trying to work for the pro-choice movement. And we went to an orientation that very night, and the room was packed full of people who were all there for the same reasons we were, and who were ready to get involved and work.
Feminist groups throughout the city started to organize pro-choice activities, such as drives for voter registration and petitions, workshops on how to talk about abortion, how to lobby, letter writing, and poster-making parties. Most of these activities were coordinated by organizations the general public was familiar with, such as NOW, TARAL, and Planned Parenthood.
When it became clear that there were going to be problems with the Texas legislature and we needed to deal with the Texas legislature, the caucus was prepared with history on the issue, long-term knowledge of candidates' position on the issue, and a relationship with candidates talking about the issue. And the Women's Political Caucus being a political organization could do the kind of information gathering and endorsement procedures that other groups, for example, Planned Parenthood, couldn't. And the major role, I think, of the caucus has been our carrying out political activities.
As time went on, other pro-choice groups developed. Groups like Voices for Choice, Friends of Pro-Choice, Choice Coalition Independence, and Young Adults for Reproductive Freedom.
We started the organization Young Adults for Reproductive Freedom on July 5th of 1989. It was sort of spurred on by the announcement of the Webster decision. We basically called people from our high school and tried to get them to join. We had drives and we sent out letters, and we just basically asked people if they were pro-choice and they wanted to get involved in the political system to be sure that our reproductive rights were secure, to please come join the group, and a lot of people did.
We're just trying to get more politically active, to keep our membership more involved, and to actually make a difference in terms of keeping our reproductive rights safe.
The genesis of the Choice Coalition, other than the fact that we have all talked and shared information for a long time, years even, I think was that Saturday lunch that we had at Buteras while we got ready to respond to the Webster decision. Because from that lunch, we had organized the seeds of the rally, and that's just kind of where I think of it as a beginning. There were other meetings that followed that, some open to the general population, where we talked about issues that we were interested in, and then we would form up committees to work on exploring whether we should form a corporation or whether we should just be a loose organization, an event committee that worked primarily on the rally. It was a real interesting time. Most of us had not been through the process of forming a coalition, which is a tricky business. We all had different agendas as organizations, and we often had different agendas as individuals. Some people were really action-oriented and wanted to march in the streets. Others of us wanted to work politically. Some of us liked working in organizations. Some of us had had it with organizations and wanted to do things independently, which meant they had to form their own organization. It was hard work to pull a group together who could carry off projects. And it was real interesting to me to see, from my perspective, that even in this issue, there were some people who came to it because they were interested in the issue and they would do anything, and there were others who came to it for whom other things became more important, whether it was power or some other agenda that they had that complicated their participation in the movement. And I think that's not news. I'm sure that happened in the 20s and 30s. And it's one of the things that, particularly as women, but also as men and women working on a cause, we have to be real careful to watch out for and sort of soul-searching individually to make sure we're staying on track. We got through it, but it was a tough time.
Some Houstonians worked independently to advance the pro-choice cause. Connie Calloway, for example, organized the first statewide pro-choice planning meeting.
I was in touch with Governor Hobby and asked Kate Michelman and Phyllis Dunham, who is, of course, the Texas Abortion Rights Action League director, if they would come to Houston, if I could gather all of the leadership of pro-choice here in Texas. I must say I think that the meeting was successful in that it gathered a good bit of momentum. It was the first time all the leadership of pro-choice in Texas had been together, and I do hope that momentum came from that to help with the Texans for Choice, and because I see that they are progressing very, very well.
One of the high points of Houston's pro-choice movement occurred on August 26, 1989, the Houston Rally.
One rainy Saturday afternoon at Buterres, about 10 or 12 of us sat around the table talking about what was Houston going to do with the outcome of Webster.
The Saturday before the decision, when we were having lunch at Buterres, I remember Letty Tyler saying, well, let's have a rally. And she remembered that in August was going to be the 69th anniversary of the day women got the vote. And we thought that would be a really splendid time to have a rally. It was a wonderful rally when it came to pass. It was the biggest rally that Houston had ever had. And we had, you know, celebrity talent, and Sarah Weddington was here. A lot of our state representatives and elected officials showed up. Sissy Farenthold showed up and had a wonderful standing ovation. Again, there was all this emotion about, we've done this once, and by heaven we'll do it again if we have to. And that there was this neat mix of older women passing on the oral history of why this was important to all these new first-timers who were getting involved. Young women who had never had to worry about whether they could get an abortion, but who are now feeling the threat of that.
I don't think there can be any serious doubt that Houston is a pro-choice city. For one thing, in August we turned out 4,000 people to rally for choice on a Saturday morning with a heat index of 104 degrees. Houston is not only a pro-choice city, it is a vocal pro-choice city.
The rally featured Sarah Weddington as the keynote speaker. Other distinguished speakers included Congressman and former Texas Senator Craig Washington, Representative Deborah Danberg, and prominent Hispanic leader Leonel Castillo. Other distinguished supporters who were present at the rally included Representative Larry Evans and former gubernatorial candidate Sissy Farenthold.
We are the inheritors of the dreams of a Rosa Parks who said, "I will not move to the back of the bus." And we say with no less determination, we will not let our rights be taken away.
It's time for you and I to go in and build a structure so that politicians like myself will know never again will we play politics with a woman's rights. Never will we play politics with a woman's body.
2 steps forward, 1 step back. Roe versus Wade is under attack. I've got a body, a mind and a voice. I'll fight to keep the right to make my own choice. It's my body, it's my mind, my right to choose should it come the time. It's no easy thing to decide, but it's my body, it's my right.
People, hundreds, literally thousands of people came out to make their voices heard, to let people know that they were concerned about the choice issue, concerned about reproductive rights. We never could have imagined that we would have had the incredible sentiment that we had until we saw those people at the rally, and we never could have made the effort to contact elected officials the way that we have been doing since then without the hundreds of new people, new names, new voter registration cards that we have since August.
One of the best things about the rally, particularly from the standpoint of groups like the caucus that have been pro-choice for a very long time, is that a number of organizations that had never adopted pro-choice positions before co-sponsored the rally. The YWCA, the League of Women Voters, and the Hispanic Women's Leadership Conference were all co-sponsors of the rally, really broadening the base of groups that took active positions on this issue.
Traditionally, Hispanic women have been very silent about our involvement in the pro-choice movement. However, after becoming more informed about the ramifications of our silence, we decided to endorse the pro-choice movement because we feel very strongly that we should be the ones to control our lives and to make our own decisions.
The rally was an overwhelming success. Well over 3,000 people attended, and most importantly, it allowed pro-choice Houstonians to openly express their support. On November 4th, 1989, Operation Rescue staged another invasion, this time at the West Loop Clinic. But a special group of pro-choice volunteers was on hand to keep anti-choice protesters from intimidating the patients, an organization called the Coalition to End Clinic Violence. While most other pro-choice organizations were reactivated in response to Webster, the coalition reactivated in 1987 because of increased clinic violence.
The Coalition to End Clinic Violence had its beginnings in November of 1983, and there were a number of concerned persons in women's rights organizations at that time who were talking about devising some type of a group to protect women who were undergoing harassment at local clinics. And I recall one specific incident. It was a girl who was about 16, and this was already the second time that she had been here. And she came with her mother, but her mother was so frightened that she stayed in the car. And halfway through the street as I was accompanying her, and she just had to listen to the shouts, you know, murderer, baby killer, and all this. And she just slumped into the middle of the street crying, and they came rushing up at her to try. They figured they had one here. And she said, you know, this is the second time I've been here. I don't want to have to come back. I'm just afraid to go through this. I don't think anybody should have to put up with this kind of assault. Isn't there anything can be done about this? And up until that point, I think a lot of us were wondering, you know, really, is this the way to do it, or are we really needed? And that just underscores why it was necessary. And without physically picking her up, because I was concerned about her physical safety being in the street, I just told her, you really don't have to pay attention to what these people are saying. They're emotionally disturbed individuals. Nobody is going to harm you. We can get you in there safely, and you can sit down and relax and think about what you want to do. And she said, I know what I want to do. I have to do this. And she was able to gain her composure, and we got her in. But the attacks upon me by the anti-abortionists were just very severe, and they were attempting to provoke me to violence. One of them spit on me at that time, and it was a test. That was a test of my ability to resist striking back, I think.
As clinic escorts, it's our responsibility to escort patients safely into the clinics past the protesters. It's generally not too difficult, but at the rescue that they staged, the protesters staged on November the 4th, I believe they called them Operation Rescues, it was the worst that I'd ever seen it. There were 150 or 200 protesters converged at the clinic. They had women and children and small babies in a mob scene. On that day, several of the escorts were assaulted. As we were encircled around one patient, the escort standing beside me, Ramona, was choked and had her shirt ripped. And then another escort was thrown to the ground. During one point during the assault, I realized, along with another escort, that the protesters had actually broken into the clinic. At that time, I ran up to the first police officer that I saw, and grabbed him and told him the protesters were in the clinic and we needed police in the clinic, and the police officer stood there. He didn't move. I told 3 or 4 police officers before anybody moved to the back. About a week after that occurrence, I found that I was very traumatized by the assaults that I received, and I found that I was talking with everyone about it and wanting to talk about it and needing to talk about it. It was traumatic. It was.
Everybody was getting upset, but no real action was coming out of it. And then we got together with the escorts and said, maybe what we should do would be go before City Council, talk to the people. Right about that time, there was a lot of interest in what the police department was doing. There was a lot of things that needed investigation, and we, in essence, jumped on the bandwagon of that. We took our videotape before City Council. We practiced our speeches over and over about what we wanted to say to these people, what we wanted them to understand, because obviously no one was understanding. And we got up there, talked to them. Again, the media, very little response, but City Council members were very wonderful.
The protesters were allowed to sit and lie down in front of moving vehicles trying to gain access to the clinic. The protesters were allowed to physically block the driveway. The protesters were allowed to bang and beat on vehicles with signs that had wooden stake handles.
Is the police chief coming over today?
Yes, he is.
Maybe we could get some explanation from him, or an attempt anyway, because, you know, if police aren't going to do anything, then why be there at all? They ought to be off somewhere, you know, eating donuts, drinking coffee, doing something constructive.
At City Hall, they seemed fairly receptive to what we had to say. And after that time, there's been another rescue staged. The police officers came and they cordoned off the entrance to the clinic so that there'd be access. And actually, the rescue couldn't occur that day because the police officers beat them to the punch. After the rescue attempt in Houston, the protesters had to go to Pasadena, which I don't wish it on Pasadena, but the protesters were actually unable to hit a clinic in Houston because every women's clinic in Houston was protected as they should be by Houston police.
On Sunday, November 12th, over 1,000 Houstonians traveled to Austin once again for the Texans for Choice rally.
Texans for Choice began as an organization of organizations so that we would have one central clearinghouse for information and action on the abortion issue. The kickoff event for Texans for Choice was the rally in Austin on November 12th, one of the National Mobilization Day rallies. We produced the third largest rally in the nation. 20,000 people came to Austin to tell the legislators that we would not stay quiet any longer.
One of the ways that we knew that the November rally was successful in Austin, from a Houston point of view, was that we had decided that we would order 2 buses to take Houstonians up for the day and back. And people kept calling and calling. And before we left that day, we had 5 buses of people who had signed on to go to Austin. We knew then that things had changed.
When I arrived at that rally, I was overwhelmed. I'd gotten my start in politics myself, working with Texans for Equal Rights Amendment. And that was back when we had first passed the ERA, and there were a number of rescission demonstrations, and the Pink Ladies were up at the Capitol every week having demonstrations. And I thought I'd seen many, many large demonstrations, but I was absolutely overwhelmed at the choice demonstration. It was larger by several times than any demonstration I'd ever seen at the Capitol. The crowd went on for forever and for hours. We had to start the rally well before even half the people had arrived at the Capitol because the crowd went on so far down Congress Avenue. And a rally like that is really important at this point in time. I truly believe that since we passed the Equal Rights Amendment and until the last couple of years, We have been in a very right-wing, reactionary kind of trend in this country, and very much so in this state. I know for a fact that even some of our very best friends, like Lieutenant Governor Bill Hobby, had said on a number of occasions to Ann Richards and to me and to Lena Guerrero that he felt that we didn't have the public on our side. While he was still pro-choice, that at some point representative democracy had to prevail, and perhaps we had to take some compromises and we had to take some retreat from a choice position, because it was his observation that there simply were not the numbers to support our side. Well, that rally turned that opinion around.
It was unbelievable. I think like 50,000 people were in Austin. Really, you could see the excitement there. One of the things I was excited to see was there was a young student passing out literature for Catholics for free choice. We've never had a Texas affiliate. We've always just had to be members and get the information from DC, so that was neat to see other organizations, more minority people participating, and really realizing that our decision-making process was in jeopardy. The people that attended really felt roused. They were excited about it, and it was literally bringing the people out that felt that it was a woman's right to make the decision for herself, that she, with counseling and in the privacy of her own heart, would decide to have an abortion or not, and that it really wasn't some minority's religious beliefs.
For now, the struggle goes on, and Houstonians are determined to continue fighting for choice.
Well, it's her body, it's her mind, her right to choose should it come the time. It's no easy thing to decide, but it's her body, it's her right. Some people say, don't you even begin. You just say no, or you pay for your sins. That kind of advice is useless, you see. Life isn't as tidy as they'd like it to be. Oh, it's my body, it's my mind, my right to choose should it come the time. It's no easy thing to decide, but it's my body, it's my right. Say it one more way, try to make it plain. Privacy is the right I defend. We live with ourselves inside our own skin. This is where the state stops and I begin. It's her body, it's her mind, her right to choose should it come the time. It's no easy thing to decide, but it's her body, it's her right. Yeah, it's her body, it's her mind, her right to choose should it come the time. It's no easy thing to decide, but it's her body, it's her right.
Start to enter. There will now be sound effects of thunder as you start your sounds and the lights come up. I wanted to do a production of Oedipus Rex for a very personal reason. That's because I'd never seen a Greek tragedy done where they sang the choruses.
My children, you who have descended from ancient Cadmus into my care, why have you rushed here to this place begging for God's help?
theater history classes that to see Greek tragedy without sung choruses must be like somebody 1,000 years from now finding the score of Oklahoma and putting on a production where the chorus stands around going, Oklahoma, where the wind comes sweeping down the plain. It isn't the same thing at all. It doesn't even...
The music faculty taped some background music that had been written specifically by Sterling Tinsley for this production. We have a very multi-talented faculty, and we all work on lots of different things, sometimes things we never dreamed that we would be doing. But that's
in Oedipus, the dance became somewhat of a relief. There were bright moments in the dance when there were not many bright moments on stage. So the dance became a break in the action.
Serge had talked to me a number of years ago about wanting to get involved with stage design because as an artist he was so intrigued by the scale of production.
Making something from nothing. If, for example, if you went out and looked at our stage set and how it all began, it began by pencil on a piece of paper, a few ideas, and scribbling.
This spring, the 4 areas in fine arts, drama, music, dance, and art, joined together for a memorable production of Oedipus Rex, here in our own showplace, the Heynen Theater, and it was an exciting event. But year-round, every year, there is an ongoing collaboration as the departments work together to provide the best education possible in fine arts. I'm Larry Mers, coordinator of Fine Arts Department at the Houston Community College System here on the Central Campus, where the arts and students' dreams converge.
And darling, you two fight out some personal grievance?
I feel as a drama teacher that it's very important that students get an experience on stage outside the classroom. So I'm trying to schedule the kinds of plays that, first of all, will give every student that comes through our program an opportunity at one time or another to perform on stage. And secondly, that will give the students a background in different kinds of drama. We have a very strong program, I think, in voice study and in movement study. The voice program includes singing classes for the actors. Actors are required to take certain music classes. They're also required to take speaking voice classes, beginning with voice and diction and going all the way through voice for the actor and accents and dialects and that sort of thing. And we have a very strong program in movement. The students are required to take dance classes, but they're also required to take pantomime and stage movement.
What do you see? What do you see?
Particularly the adult students who are eager for a professional career are astounded that they come to the community college and get not just an introduction in general to acting, but some very strong, intensive, technically oriented work so that they can see and measure their own progress and can go out into the world confident that they have achieved a technique that's going to serve them indefinitely.
Core of our curriculum would have to be the technique, and we do teach ballet, modern, and jazz technique. We teach 4 levels of ballet, from absolute beginner to professional. The artist-in-residence functions as a role model, and this past year our artist-in-residence has been Anita Lemon, a solo dancer here in Houston. In her solo concert this weekend, one of our students is her stage manager, and her ushers and her servers and the backstage people are all dance majors. This is very important because it's important that a dance major or a potential artist see what goes into being an artist. It's not just being able to get up and perform. The students that come out of this program do very, very well at four-year institutions. Here at our school, we have rather small classes. We have hands-on teaching, so the students are nurtured and brought to their best development. When we send them out to what is probably a larger program, I think they have a good sense of self-confidence, a good sense of how to move, and they fit very well in a larger program.
Performing arts students in our fine arts department and the art, quote unquote, the art students in our department are really working to the same end. It's just we have a different vehicle. Everyone is creative. The performer at the end of the semester puts on a production, a play, a dance. At the end of the semester, in art, they exhibit, they show. And just the other day, we had some donations given to us for our gallery from an art dealer who said, I hope you're telling your students and making sure they know about art is business. I think it's really important that art and artists are viewed as being professional. The art that you make is a commodity. Yes, it's aesthetic, yes, it's pleasing, and yes, we can get dirty and have a good time when we're painting and making products and making art, but when you take off your clothes, you have to put on a tie and transform and take that body of work and turn it into monetary value so you can eat, drink, sleep. I'm not going to tell you, no, you can't do something. I'm going to tell you, show me. If you have an idea, I'm going to let you grow with it and go with it. I want the student to push himself. I encourage students to fail because you can't grow until you fail. If you don't know what failure is, how are you going to understand growth? I want to see a successful student. I think that's what's going to make me happy, make me thrilled.
The most common and most popular classes that we offer are private instruction in piano and voice. But we also have people on the faculty, artists in residence, the Cimarron Wind Quintet, and they teach flute, clarinet, saxophone, French horn, bassoon. We have our chamber music program, which is growing by leaps and bounds, and this semester they'll be going on a trip to Vienna to perform over there.
She's smart, she's smart. Okay, one more time. Top of 7 and 1.
We have our choir, which is a college choir for credit. In addition to the choir, we have our opera workshop program, and this is a little more advanced for singers who have had some training in voice.
Good, now let's get into that. Good work.
In the port of Amsterdam, there's a sailor who eats.
Our Artists in Residence program is designed to help the school become more visible in the community, but it also serves the purpose of the students because the students have opportunities to work with these fabulous teachers. Denise LeBrun, she's a vocal artist in residence, and she has had a worldwide career. Almost all of the members of our faculty are still actively pursuing their careers, and they're still vibrant and enthusiastic enough that they're able to bring this enthusiasm to the student, and they're still struggling enough in their own careers and endeavors that they can help the students to realize that, you know, it isn't a bed of roses and I'm not better than you. And just because I am at this point in my career You know, there's somebody else that's at that point, and we each have to help the students where we are. The students' goals come first around here, and that is taught from the top down, and we all hold that true, that, you know, the reason that we are here is to help that student.
Go ahead. Okay, guys, show them the star. Hey, guys. Good luck. What's up? Good luck, you're here.